on the right side of Fifth Avenue. There were quite a few farms there. And I assumed they were raised there. I think the celery farm was too wet for strawberries. I know it was a long time ago. I know the house on Franklin Turnpike, and they were renovating the house, and they found one of the old strawberry box.
Oh, wow.
Did you ever hear that story? In between the walls.
Oh, wow.
I saw the box, but I don't know who has it.
Mr. Thomas's love for nature and the celery farm can also be applied to the strawberry farms. Although the farms were before his time, even though he has lived in Allendale since his birth in 1923, it can almost certainly be assumed that Mr. Thomas would have also fought for the preservation of these farms if given the chance. In a New York Times article, Thomas is quoted as saying, quote, "You know, back in the 19th century, we were the strawberry capital of the world. When I was growing up in the 1930s, it was still very rural, mostly farms, where they grew lettuce, celery, onions, and other garden crops," end quote. As a child, Mr. Thomas grew up in a community that was probably more similar to that of the time of Allendale strawberry farms than of today's world.
In the 1800s, Allendale strawberries were being shipped to nearby areas such as Paterson, Newark, and New York, at first by horse-drawn carriage, and in 1848 by railroad. In 1859, urbanites were flocking from the cities to Allendale to create permanent homes, summer homes, or just to vacation. Either way, this began the decline of Allendale strawberries, as farmers came to the realization that they could make more money selling their land as building sites than they could with the crops they planted. However, although Allendale strawberry farms have been absent for around 150 years, the town has chosen to continue to remember this past. For example, the history page of Allendale's website is largely dedicated to discussing the town's farming past.
Perhaps, as explained in the discussion of the celery farms, the U.S. was originally established as an agricultural nation. And in the end of the 1900s, people were beginning to remember this cleaner earth and looking ahead to preserve what they could.
The municipal building is currently located next to the town's library at 290 Franklin Turnpike. As mentioned previously, Thomas was always a big promoter of the small town feel in Allendale. In a New York Times article, as an example of Allendale's community, Thomas said, quote, "The key is the Allendale Holiday Observers, which I believe is unique to Allendale. It was formed not too long after World War I, when the neighbors pooled their fireworks. Now it puts on 4 events: July 4th fireworks, the Halloween costume party, a Christmas party where Santa Claus comes into town on the fire engine giving gifts to the children, and an Easter egg hunt, where all the townspeople can come together, celebrate, get to know each other," end quote. Groups such as the Allendale Holiday Observers that Thomas mentioned are centered around the municipal building because it serves as a meeting place. Thus, this building represents a coming together of townspeople and a strengthening of community bonds.
The municipal building is the center of town life. It is responsible for planning any celebration, improvement, and construction that occurs in Allendale. It is a gathering place for town meetings, presentations, and various programs such as the Allendale Holiday Observers. One reason that this building has become a hub for the town's groups is that it is adjacent to the town library.
The late 20th century was marked by high government involvement in the affairs of its citizens. This is exemplified by Nixon's Law and Order campaign. Therefore, the municipal building symbolizes this government power that was present at the national, state, and local levels.
The railroad, called the New Jersey Blue Line, was completed on October 19, 1848. Joseph Warner Allen was the surveyor and supervisor of the Paterson and Ramapo project that ran through present-day Allendale, making 12 stops a day at the Allendale station. The station was named after Joseph Allen, and the borough later also adopted the name Allendale. The new railroad line made a significant impact in shaping the town.
Thomas Stiles recalls the railroad was largely used by the working class, people commuting from Allendale to jobs in the city. The railroad served to let Allendale residents participate in the business side of the city while living in a much more rural area.
When the railroad was opened, the effect on crops and new incoming residents was noted. Allendale had a strong farming presence, and the railroad allowed for easy, accessible shipping. Now farm goods could reach New York City, Philadelphia, Boston, and Paterson, as well as the Campbell Soup Factory. As for residents, the railroad brought more people to this beautiful farm country with easy city access. As Pat Wendell noted, for the railroad was to bring a boom to land values, turn farm land into building plots, and transform a rural community into a vacation paradise and later to a commuter suburb.
Nationally, the railroad had an effect of standardization. Joseph Warner Allen's son, William Frederick Allen, is known as the father of standard time. With the railroad brought a time schedule that needed to be universal, and therefore the Paterson and Ramapo rail line brought Allendale into the national time standards.
Highlands was built in 1965. Before this, students visited Franklin Turnpike schools, Brookside, and were bused to other high schools in the area.
The local children used to be sent to other high schools in the area, but the Brookside Franklin Turnpike schools marked the transition where children could now go to school within Allendale.
Where did you go to school?
I went to Brookside School the year it opened.
Okay.
That was like 31 or no, it was before that. It had opened. And Ramsey High School. Everyone from 8 towns around here went to Ramsey High School.
Thomas may have included the Brookside and Franklin Turnpike schools to emphasize the education system present in the town versus the various outside high schools.
Allendale built its second schoolhouse in 1862 on Franklin Turnpike. The school cost $2,000 and was a one-story, 25 by 35 feet building. Later, Brookside was opened in 1929 with 225 students. As the town grew, so did the educational system. And after Northern Highlands High School was built in 1965, the community's focus on education grew. The mural may serve to remember the beginnings of the school system and allow for reflection upon its change.
Education has been a growing national focus. Especially after the Cold War, there was a race to produce mathematically and scientifically focused students in order to stay on top of technological advancements, and therefore, with this in mind, the residents may have been influenced to remember Allendale's educational background.
A local resident stated, "The tower gives the town that traditional feel I love." The community remains proud of the country traditional feel it has been able to preserve, and the clock is one sense of such pride. In 1993, a renovation to the brick-paved sidewalks and the tower was made, making this an Allendale highlight to be remembered in the mural. Mr. Thomas also shares a similar view on the clock.
The town clock may be a response to the railroad and the time standardization. The clock is a symbol that puts citizens on a schedule and in turn unifies the nation on the same timetables and agenda.
The original Allendale firehouse was dedicated in April 1913, but burnt down in 1963.
Stiles connects the firehouse with a sense of community. It was a center that held many events for the community and brought the townspeople together, again representing the closeness of the town.
This building housed the local volunteer fire department and upheld a feeling of determination and pride. It also served as an important meeting place that held elections, movie showings in the 1920s, as well as school graduation ceremonies.
Nationally, the image of the firehouse is remembering the brave citizens that have served their respective areas and protected their local people. When asked by the New York Times if it was hard to get volunteers for the mural, Thomas responded, quote, "Heavens no. We got 15 people to paint the pictures. The youngest was 13, and the oldest was Felice Quebec, who's, let's say she's around 80. A local man donated the paint, another provided the scaffolding. Bernie's Bagels provided, well, bagels, and of course there was pizza," end quote. Do you remember how the community reacted to the mural?
I don't remember that anyone complained about it. I think everyone liked it. I remember the chairman of the planning board, John Young. Oh, he was so pleased it was done. because there were always arguments about giving permits to have businesses in that store back then. This was just the thing that the town needed.
Overall, it is evident that the mural was designed to represent specific aspects of Allendale's past. Most prominently, the mural's painters chose to emphasize Allendale's agrarian as well as tight-knit community. This was a huge contrast with the modern-day reality of suburbia and constant development.
Thomas himself said, quote, "We were looking for ways to remember our history, take some pride in it, and this seemed perfect. A huge portrait of it in the middle of town," end quote.